The contractions were coming every 3 minutes when my phone rang. I was gripping the hospital bed rail, my husband Sylvester nowhere to be found. Again, when I saw the unknown number flash across the screen, something told me to answer it. Maybe it was the morphine, maybe it was intuition, but I swiped right just as another wave of pain crashed over me. Hello? I gasped between breaths. Is this Loïs Bronx Morgan? The voice was young, nervous, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Yes? Who is this? I managed, trying to focus through the haze of labor pains. My name is Jessica. Jessica Rodriguez. I need to tell you something about your husband. The words hit harder than any contraction. I knew. Before she said another word, I knew exactly who this was and why she was calling. The careful way she said your husband, like she was tasting the words. The tremor in her voice that spoke of guilt and desperation. I'm sorry, she continued, rushing now. I know this is terrible timing, but I couldn't keep lying anymore. Sylvester told me you were having the baby today, and I had to tell you. We've been together for 8 months. 8 months. I was 8 months pregnant. The room tilted slightly, though whether from the epidural or the revelation, I couldn't tell. Through the window, I could see the parking garage where Sylvester had supposedly gone to move the car to a better spot 20 minutes ago. The same car that apparently spent many evenings in Jessica Rodriguez's driveway. Are you there? She asked, voice smaller now, like she was realizing the magnitude of what she'd just done. I found my voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. I'm here. I'm in labor right now, actually. A sharp intake of breath. Oh God. I'm so sorry. I didn't know when. I just couldn't. It's okay, I heard myself say, which was strange because nothing about this was okay. But something else was happening. Something beyond the shock and betrayal. A clarity was settling over me, cold and sharp as winter air. My name is Loïs Bronx Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and until today, I thought I was living a fairly predictable life as a senior financial analyst for Morrison and Associates. I've always been the responsible one. The daughter who helped her immigrant parents navigate American bureaucracy, the employee who stayed late to triple-check calculations, the wife who managed our household finances down to the penny while my husband pursued his entrepreneurial dreams. People trust me with their secrets, their money, their most important decisions. What they don't know is that growing up translating for my parents taught me to read people, to see the spaces between words where truth hides. Sylvester James Morgan, 36, my husband of 4 years. A man whose charm could fill a room but whose follow-through couldn't fill a teacup. He's been developing his consulting business for the past 2 years while I carried our health insurance, our mortgage, and apparently our marriage. I'd convinced myself his restlessness was creative energy, his late nights productive ambition. Now I understood. They were something else entirely. The pain from another contraction forced me to breathe deeply, and with that breath came a strange sense of relief. Not happiness. I wasn't delusional, but the relief of finally knowing, of having the missing piece that made all the strange puzzle pieces of the last 8 months snap into place. You said 8 months, I said when I could speak again. Yes, it started in November. At that conference in Dallas, he said things weren't good at home, that you were distant and focused on work. November, the FinTech Innovation Summit. Sylvester had insisted on going, said it would be good for networking. I'd been proud of him for taking initiative. I was 12 weeks pregnant then, sick as a dog with morning sickness, working extra hours to prepare for maternity leave, distant and focused on work. That's what he'd called it. Jessica, I said, testing her name on my tongue. How old are you? 26. Of course she was, young enough to believe a married man's stories about his unhappy home life, young enough to think love would conquer all the practical realities of lawyers and divorce papers and custody agreements. A nurse appeared in my peripheral vision, checking monitors, adjusting equipment. She caught my eye and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, giving her the same composed smile I'd perfected in countless client meetings. Everything's under control here. Is he with you now? I asked Jessica. No, he said he was going to the hospital. To be with you. I almost laughed. The hospital parking garage, most likely, making frantic phone calls to this girl who'd just blown up his carefully constructed double life. Or maybe he was driving around the block, working up the courage to come back upstairs and pretend to be the devoted husband. Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Are there others? The pause told me everything. I don't know. I thought it was just me. But there were some calls he'd take privately, Some weekends he couldn't see me because of work trips that didn't match what he told you. Work trips. Sylvester hadn't taken a business trip since his consulting business existed mainly on LinkedIn and business cards. But he'd had plenty of weekend conferences and networking events I'd encouraged him to attend. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and I gripped the phone tighter. Through the pain, my mind was working with a clarity I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about a pattern, a system, a man who'd turned deception into an art form. When the contraction passed, I realized Jessica was crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I should have figured it out sooner. I should have known better." But he was so convincing. Hey, I said, and I meant it gently.
Yeah.
"This isn't your fault. You're not the one who made vows." Truth is, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Not really. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. I'd just chosen not to see them. Or maybe I'd been too tired to look too closely. Pregnancy has a way of narrowing your focus to the essential, growing a human, preparing for its arrival, keeping everything else stable until the chaos passes. But now that the pieces were falling into place, I could see the pattern clearly. It started small. Sylvester began showering at odd times, right after coming home from client meetings, sometimes twice a day. His phone, which used to lie carelessly on every surface, suddenly lived in his pocket, face down, always. He started doing his own laundry, which I'd initially attributed to newfound consideration for his pregnant wife. Sweet, I'd thought, helpful. Then there were the schedule changes. Monthly networking events became weekly obligations. Weekend workshops multiplied. He joined a gym that was inexplicably 30 minutes from our house, when there were 3 closer options. When I suggested we go together, he explained that his membership was part of a professional package that didn't include spouses. The money bothered me most. I handle our finances, have since we got married, because I'm better with numbers, and he's more of a big picture guy. But lately, there had been discrepancies. Cash withdrawals I couldn't account for, restaurant charges on weekdays, when he said he was at the library working, a hotel charge in December that he'd explained as a potential client meeting that never materialized into actual business. I'd confronted him about the hotel. We'd had our first real fight about money since the early days of our marriage. He'd been defensive, accused me of not trusting him, said I was being controlling about finances. I'd apologized. Actually apologized for questioning a hotel charge for $200 on a Tuesday night in a city 40 minutes from our house. The phone calls were probably the biggest red flag. Sylvester had always been social, talkative, the kind of person who made friends in grocery store lines. But these calls were different, quieter, more intimate. He'd step onto the balcony or into the garage, speak in low tones I couldn't quite hear through the walls. When I asked who he was talking to, it was always work stuff. Boring business development conversations I wouldn't be interested in. There were the new clothes, too. Not expensive stuff, but thoughtful upgrades. A cologne I didn't recognize, underwear that definitely wasn't from the discount pack we usually bought. He'd explained it as wanting to look more professional for client meetings, and I'd been proud of him for investing in his image. The technology shifts should have been obvious to someone who works with data systems all day. Sylvester upgraded his phone without mentioning it, switched to a plan with unlimited everything when our shared plan had been fine for years. He set up new passwords on everything: laptop, iPad, even our shared Netflix account. "Security is more important now," he'd said, "especially with the baby coming. We need to be more careful about identity theft." Looking back, the most telling sign was how he started treating me differently. Not worse, exactly, but like I was fragile, breakable, someone to be managed rather than partnered with. He'd insist I rest instead of helping with weekend errands. He'd take phone calls in other rooms, so I could nap. He became solicitous in a way that felt like guilt disguised as consideration. But I was tired, working extra hours to prepare for maternity leave, focused on nursery preparation and prenatal appointments, and making sure we were financially ready for the reduction in income. It was easier to accept his explanations than to dig deeper, easier to trust than to investigate. So I made some quiet moves. First, I changed our banking setup. Sylvester had access to our checking account, but not our savings, which held most of our emergency fund and my retirement rollover from my previous job. I moved that money to a new account at a different bank, one where only my name appeared on the paperwork. I told myself it was just good financial planning, making sure we had protected assets in case of unexpected emergencies. Then I started documenting things. Nothing dramatic, just notes in my phone about the discrepancies I noticed. Dates of overnight trips that didn't match business travel receipts. Times when he said he was one place but his location sharing showed another. Screenshots of unusual charges before they appeared on our monthly statements. I also quietly reached out to my college roommate Lisa, who'd gone to law school and now worked in family practice in Seattle. I didn't tell her specifics, just asked hypothetical questions about asset protection and prenatal legal considerations. Research for a friend, I'd said, which wasn't entirely untrue. The most important thing I did was back up our computer files to a cloud account Sylvester didn't know about. Every document, every photo, every piece of our shared digital life. I told myself it was insurance against data loss, but deep down, I knew I was building an evidence archive. I even started tracking his car's mileage, something I'd done for tax purposes in previous years but had let slide. Suddenly, the numbers were much higher than his claimed activities could account for. Hundreds of extra miles appearing each week with no reasonable explanation. None of these precautions felt dramatic at the time. They felt like the kind of careful preparation that had gotten me through college on scholarship, through professional certifications, through every major challenge in my life. When you grow up translating complex systems for your parents, you learn to trust your instincts about when something doesn't add up. Now, lying in this hospital bed with another woman's voice confirming my worst suspicions, I was grateful for that instinct, and for the quiet preparations I'd made without even fully admitting to myself why I was making them. The labor pains were getting stronger, closer together, but my mind felt sharper than it had in months. Jessica was still on the phone, crying softly, waiting for me to respond with anger or hysteria or blame. Instead, I found myself asking practical questions. Jessica, do you have any documentation of your relationship? Photos? Messages? Anything that proves how long this has been going on? She sniffled. Yes. Why? Because I think we're both going to need proof of what really happened here. And I suspect there might be other women who need to know the truth about Sylvester too. A longer pause. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Crying? Screaming? He always said you were emotional, that you overreacted to things. Emotional. The same word he'd used when I'd questioned the hotel charge, when I'd asked about his sudden interest in privacy, when I'd suggested we needed to have a serious conversation about our finances before the baby arrived. Any reasonable concern or question had been dismissed as pregnancy hormones or emotional instability. Jessica, I said, I need to go. I'm about to have a baby, but I want you to save everything. Every text, every photo, every voicemail. Don't delete anything, and don't let him know we've talked. Can you do that? Yes, she said quickly. But what are you going to do? I looked out the window again. Sylvester was walking back across the parking garage, his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Jessica back, wondering why she wasn't answering, probably frantic about damage control. I'm going to have this baby, I said, and then I'm going to figure out exactly who I married. I hung up just as Sylvester appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath, phone nowhere to be seen. Sorry, babe, he said, that familiar charming smile lighting up his face. Parking was a nightmare. How are we doing? I looked at him, really looked and saw a stranger, someone who could lie to my face while I was in labor, someone who'd been lying for months, maybe years, about things both large and small, someone who'd built his life on deception so thorough that even now he thought he could pull it off. We're doing fine, I said, matching his smile with one of my own, just ready to meet our baby. He squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, thinking about Jessica Rodriguez and hotel charges, and all the quiet preparations I'd made without knowing why. In a few hours, I'd be holding my child, and then the real work would begin.
The next morning, I discharged myself from the hospital earlier than recommended.
Baby Emma was healthy, beautiful, and sleeping peacefully in her car seat as Sylvester drove us home, chattering nervously about adjusting to parenthood and how proud he was of me for being so strong during labor. I listened with half my attention while mentally cataloging everything I needed to do. First priority was making sure Emma and I were safe and settled. Second priority was documenting everything before Sylvester had a chance to cover his tracks further. Third priority was figuring out exactly how deep this deception went. The house felt different when we walked in. Not just because we now had a baby, but because I was seeing it through different eyes. How many times had Jessica been here while I was at work? How many other women had Sylvester brought into the space I'd worked so hard to make into a home? Why don't you rest while I take care of things?
Sylvester suggested, his voice carefully casual.
I'll handle the groceries, get caught up on some work stuff, let you focus on recovery. Work stuff, right? Probably meant calling Jessica and whoever else, doing damage control, figuring out how to keep his various stories straight.
That sounds perfect, I agreed.
I am pretty tired. I settled into the nursery with Emma, but instead of napping, I was planning. The first thing I needed was help from someone I could trust completely.
I text my sister Amy, who lived 2 hours away and worked as a private investigator.
Can you come stay for a few days? Want you to meet Emma, and I could use help with baby stuff. True, but not the whole truth. Her response was immediate.
Of course, on my way.
Amy arrived that evening with casseroles, flowers, and the kind of professional discretion that made her excellent at her job. After Sylvester went to bed, I told her everything. She listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes in the small leather notebook she always carried.
Jesus, Lois, she said when I finished.
You've been living with a stranger. I think it's worse than that. I think Jessica might not be the only one. And I think there might be financial stuff I don't know about yet. Amy nodded grimly. Have you checked credit reports lately? Any accounts you're not aware of?
I hadn't.
Sylvester handled his own credit card, had his own checking account for his business expenses. I'd trusted him to manage those responsibly while I handled our major shared obligations. We need to look at everything, Amy said. Bank records, credit reports, phone records if we can get them, social media forensics. If he's been living a double life, there will be digital breadcrumbs everywhere.
How long will that take?
Depends on how sloppy he's been. Most cheaters aren't as careful as they think they are.
Give me 48 hours.
While Amy worked her investigative magic, I focused on Emma and recovery, playing the part of the blissful new mother. Sylvester was attentive, helpful, everything a supportive partner should be. He brought me coffee in bed, changed diapers without being asked, posted sweet photos of our new family on social media. If I hadn't known about Jessica, I might have thought we were closer than ever. But I did know, and once you see the cracks in someone's facade, you can't unsee them. The way he angled his phone away from me when texting, how he volunteered to run errands that should have taken 20 minutes but stretched to 2 hours. The careful way he asked about my energy levels and emotional state, like he was gathering intelligence. Amy's preliminary findings were worse than I'd imagined. He has 3 credit cards you don't know about, she reported on day 2, showing me printouts at the kitchen table while Sylvester was supposedly at the grocery store. Total debt of about $37,000, restaurant charges, hotels, retail purchases, travel expenses that don't match anything in your shared accounts. My stomach dropped. $37,000. That was more than we had in our emergency fund, money I'd been carefully saving for maternity leave and unexpected baby expenses. There's more, Amy continued. I found social media accounts under slightly different names, different privacy settings, different friend groups. And Lois, there are photos, multiple women, multiple locations, dating back at least 2 years. She showed me screenshots that made my hands shake. Sylvester at dinner with a brunette I didn't recognize. Sylvester on a beach vacation I'd never heard about, his arm around a blonde in a bikini. Sylvester at what looked like a wedding with a redhead wearing a dress that suggested she wasn't just a casual friend. How did I not know about any of this? Because he's good at compartmentalization, Amy said gently. And because you trusted him. That's not a character flaw, Lois. That's what married people are supposed to do. But the financial revelations were what really scared me. Amy had found evidence of cash advances, expensive gifts, weekend trips I'd never heard about. Sylvester hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been financing his deception with money we didn't have. The credit cards are in his name only, Amy explained. But depending on your state's laws about marital debt, you could be responsible for some of this. We need to talk to a lawyer. That afternoon, while Sylvester took Emma for a walk around the neighborhood, I called Lisa in Seattle. I need a referral for a family law attorney in my area, I said without preamble. And I need someone who can see me this week. Lois, what's going on? I gave her the abbreviated version. By the time I finished, she was already looking up names in her professional directory. Rebecca Morrison, she said finally. She's in your city, specializes in high-asset divorce cases, particularly ones involving financial deception. I'll call her directly. Tell her it's urgent. Lisa, what am I looking at here? Hefrity realistically? A pause. If everything you're telling me is accurate, you're looking at divorce proceedings with complications around marital debt, potential financial fraud, and child custody. The good news is that courts don't look kindly on spouses who hide assets or rack up secret debt. The bad news is that this process could take months, maybe over a year. Months. I looked down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in her bouncer, unaware that her family was falling apart around her. What should I do right now today to protect myself and Emma? Document everything, which it sounds like you're already doing. Don't tip him off that you know anything. And whatever you do, don't sign anything or make any major financial decisions until you've talked to Rebecca. Rebecca Morrison could see me Friday morning. That gave me 3 days to gather as much evidence as possible without Sylvester suspecting anything. Amy and I worked systematically. We photographed documents, downloaded bank statements, created backup copies of everything we could access legally. I called Jessica back and asked her to come over Saturday afternoon when Sylvester would be at his weekly basketball game. Are you sure that's safe? Jessica asked. He'll be gone for hours, and I think you need to see some things I've discovered. I think there are other women you should know about. When Jessica arrived Saturday, she was not what I'd expected. Younger looking than her voice had suggested, nervous but determined, carrying a folder thick with printed text messages and emails. I brought everything, she said, settling onto my couch while Amy made coffee and I fed Emma. 2 years worth of messages, photos, even voicemails. 2 years? I looked up sharply. You said 8 months. That's when we started being together physically. But we'd been talking online for almost 2 years. He found me on a professional networking site, said he was looking for marketing help for his consulting business. Amy and I exchanged glances. Sylvester's consulting business that existed mainly on paper, the one that never seemed to generate actual revenue. Jessica opened her folder. He told me you two were basically separated but staying together until after the baby was born. He said you'd both agreed the marriage was over, but wanted to keep things stable during the pregnancy. Did he ever mention other women he was working with? Other marketing consultants or business contacts? Actually, yes. He said he was talking to several different people about promotional strategies. I thought it made sense to get multiple perspectives. Amy leaned forward. Did he ever give you names or show you conversations with these other consultants? He mentioned Amanda, Jennifer, and someone named Kelly. He said they were all helping with different aspects of business development. My blood ran cold. Amy pulled out her laptop and showed Jessica the social media screenshots she'd compiled. Is this Amanda? Amy asked, pointing to the brunette from the restaurant photos. Jessica's face went white. Oh my God! Yes, that's her. He said she was helping with networking events. What about Jennifer? The blonde. Yes, he said she specializes in online presence. We went through the entire collection of photos. Jessica identified 4 different women by name. Women Sylvester had described to her as business associates or marketing consultants. Women who, based on the photographic evidence, were clearly much more than professional contacts. How many of us are there? Jessica whispered. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think we're going to find out. By the time Sylvester returned from basketball, Jessica was gone and Amy had helped me create a comprehensive timeline of his deceptions. Financial records, social media evidence, testimony from Jessica, and digital forensics painted a picture of systematic fraud that went far beyond simple infidelity. This isn't just cheating, Amy said, as we reviewed our findings. This is organized deception on a scale that suggests potential criminal activity. Financial fraud, identity theft if he's using your joint information for his personal credit applications. Possibly tax fraud if he's claiming business expenses that are actually personal entertainment. What do I do with all this? You take it to Rebecca Morrison on Monday, and Lois, you need to be prepared for the possibility that this gets bigger than just divorce proceedings. If Sylvester has been systematically defrauding multiple women or using your shared resources to finance his deceptions, there could be criminal charges. That night, I lay in bed next to my husband, listening to him breathe, wondering how long he'd been lying to me. Not just about the affairs, but about everything. Our finances, our future, our fundamental relationship. I thought about Jessica, probably lying awake in her own bed, wondering how many other women she'd been unknowingly competing with. I thought about Amanda and Jennifer and Kelly, who might not even know about each other, much less about me and Emma. Sylvester stirred beside me, mumbling something in his sleep that sounded like sorry can't tonight. Even unconscious, he was managing multiple stories. Monday morning, I met Rebecca Morrison in her downtown office while Sylvester stayed home with Emma. Rebecca was younger than I'd expected, probably early 40s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of marital deception. Your sister-in-law sent me the preliminary file, she said, gesturing to a thick folder on her desk. I've reviewed everything, and I have to say, this is one of the more comprehensive fraud cases I've seen in recent years. Fraud? Hey, I thought this was about divorce. It's about both. Your husband has been systematically deceiving you about your family's financial situation while conducting multiple extramarital relationships that he's financed with debt that could become your legal responsibility. This isn't just grounds for divorce. It's potentially criminal behavior. Rebecca walked me through the legal implications. Sylvester's secret debt could indeed become my responsibility under state law, unless we could prove it was incurred without my knowledge for non-marital purposes. The good news was that our evidence package was strong enough to support that claim. The financial deception alone is sufficient grounds for divorce with favorable terms, she explained. But if we can establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior, we can potentially pursue criminal charges and civil remediation. What does that mean, practically? It means Sylvester could face prosecution for financial fraud. It means any debt he incurred through deceptive means would be his sole responsibility. And it means you and Emma would be entitled to the maximum possible protection of your shared assets. How long does this take? Depends on how cooperative he is once he's confronted with the evidence. If he fights it, 12 to 18 months. If he's smart enough to settle quickly, maybe 6 months. 6 months minimum of legal proceedings, of living with someone I now knew was a stranger, of pretending everything was normal while building a case against the father of my child. Rebecca, I need to ask something that might sound paranoid. Is it possible he could try to hurt me or Emma if he finds out what I'm doing? She studied me carefully. Has he ever been violent? No, but I never thought he was capable of this level of deception either. I'm realizing I don't actually know what he's capable of. We can file for a protective order if needed. But first, let's see how he responds to initial confrontation. Some men in his situation become desperate and unpredictable. Others just collapse and cooperate. What's your professional opinion about Sylvester? Rebecca consulted the file again. Based on the evidence, he's not impulsive. This level of systematic deception requires planning and discipline. That suggests he's probably not dangerous, but he's definitely going to be calculating about his response. So what's the next step? We serve him with papers: divorce petition, asset protection orders, and full discovery demands. We also coordinate with the district attorney's office about potential criminal charges. I know someone in the white-collar crimes division who specializes in financial fraud cases. This is really happening. This is really happening. Lois, I know this feels overwhelming, but you've done everything right. Your documentation is excellent. Your evidence is comprehensive, and your legal position is strong. You're going to be okay. That afternoon, I called Jessica and asked her to meet me for coffee.
I needed to warn her about what was coming.
But I also needed to ask for her help. There are going to be legal proceedings, I explained, both civil and possibly criminal. You'll probably be contacted by attorneys and possibly law enforcement. She stirred her latte nervously.
What should I do?
Tell the truth, all of it. And Jessica, I think we need to find the other women. Why? Because if Sylvester has been lying to all of us, we all deserve to know the truth. And because the more evidence we have of his pattern of behavior, the stronger the legal case becomes. Jessica nodded slowly. I know Amanda's last name from his social media, and I think I can figure out who Jennifer is from the photos you showed me. Are you willing to contact them?
Yes,
This is bigger than just our situation, isn't it?
much bigger.
By Thursday, Jessica had located and contacted 3 of the other women. Their responses ranged from denial to fury to devastated recognition. 2 agreed to meet with us. 1 threatened to call Sylvester immediately and warn him. Let her, Amy advised when I panicked about Sylvester being tipped off. At this point, we have enough evidence to proceed regardless, and if she warns him, his reaction might provide additional evidence of his guilt. Friday evening, Sylvester came home from another supposed client meeting with flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant. I thought we should celebrate, he said, arranging the flowers in a vase. 1 week with our perfect little family. Perfect little family. Built on lies, financed with secret debt, and about to explode spectacularly. That's sweet, I said, accepting his kiss on the cheek. Everything go well at your meeting.
Really well.
I think this new client relationship is going to be exactly what my business needs. More lies, delivered so smoothly that I almost admired his skill. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word.
Sylvester, I said carefully.
I've been thinking about our finances. With Emma here now, maybe we should review everything together. Make sure we're planning appropriately for the future. He tensed almost imperceptibly. Of course, though things are pretty straightforward, your salary covers our regular expenses. My business income is still building. We have the emergency fund for unexpected costs. Emergency fund. The money I'd quietly moved to a protected account. Money he didn't know was no longer accessible to him. I was thinking more comprehensively. Credit reports, investment planning, maybe even estate planning now that we have Emma. Sure, he said, but I could hear the calculation in his voice. Why don't we wait until you're feeling more like yourself? The first few weeks with a newborn are probably not the best time for major financial planning. Not the best time because he needed more time to cover his tracks, to figure out how to explain $37,000 in secret debt. You're probably right, I agreed. No rush. That weekend, Amy helped me move more of our essential documents and important belongings to a secure location, not enough for Sylvester to notice immediately, but enough to protect Emma's and my most critical needs if things went badly. Monday morning, Rebecca called with an update. The DA's office is interested. They're opening a preliminary investigation into potential fraud charges. How quickly can you be ready to serve Sylvester with divorce papers? How quickly should I be ready? This week would be ideal. Once the criminal investigation becomes official, he'll likely lawyer up and stop cooperating with anything. We want to get the civil proceedings initiated while he's still off balance. Okay, let's do it. Tuesday morning, Sylvester left for what he said was a breakfast meeting with potential investors. I knew he'd be gone for at least 2 hours because Jessica had texted me that he'd invited her to meet him at a hotel 30 minutes away. The process server arrived at 9:47 a.m. Lois Bronx Morgan? Yes. I have legal documents for your husband, Sylvester James Morgan. Is he available? He's not here right now, but I can accept service on his behalf. The papers were thicker than I'd expected. Divorce petition, temporary restraining orders protecting our joint assets, discovery demands requiring him to disclose all financial accounts and debts, and a schedule for mediated settlement discussions. I called Rebecca immediately. It's done. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, like I'm about to find out who I really married. You're going to be fine, Lois. You've been incredibly smart about this whole situation. Sylvester came home at 11:30, whistling and carrying coffee from the expensive place downtown. He kissed my forehead and went to shower immediately, washing off evidence of his morning with Jessica. I realized. I waited until he was settled at his laptop before handing him the papers. What's this? He asked, though his face suggested he already knew. Divorce papers, financial disclosure demands, and probably criminal fraud charges depending on what the investigation turns up. The transformation was immediate and complete. The charming smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating I'd never seen before. Lois, what are you talking about? Criminal charges? $37,000 in secret debt. Multiple extramarital relationships financed with money we don't have. Systematic deception about your income, your business activities, and your whereabouts for the past 2 years. Should I continue? He set the papers down carefully, like they might explode. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, but I don't want to hear them anymore. This is about Jessica, isn't it? She called you. Jessica called me while I was in labor. 8 months pregnant, and your girlfriend decided to confess. But Sylvester, Jessica is not the problem here. The problem is that you've been living a completely fabricated life. He was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating his options, figuring out how much I actually knew. What do you want? He asked finally. I want you to sign the settlement agreement my attorney prepared. I want you to take responsibility for your debts. I want you to cooperate with the fraud investigation. And I want you to move out. And if I don't, then we go to trial. And Sylvester, I have evidence of everything. Financial records, photos, witness testimony, digital forensics. If you fight this, you'll lose everything. And probably face criminal prosecution. Another long pause. I could practically see his mind working, evaluating his chances, calculating the cost of different strategies. Can I see Emma before I go? The question surprised me. Of course, she's your daughter. He walked into the nursery where Emma was napping and stood over her crib for several minutes. When he came back, his shoulders had sagged slightly. I never meant for it to get this complicated, he said. Which part? The affairs, the debt, or the lying? Any of it. It started small, and then you chose to make it bigger. Over and over again for 2 years. He signed the papers without reading them. Either he trusted that I was being fair, or he knew he had no leverage to negotiate better terms. Where will you go? I asked. I'll figure something out. Sylvester, for what it's worth, I hope you get help. This level of deception isn't normal. It's not sustainable. and Emma deserves a father who can be honest with her. He looked at me for a moment like he was seeing me for the first time. You're not who I thought you were either. No, I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to really look. 3 months later, Sylvester pled guilty to financial fraud charges and agreed to a settlement that left him responsible for all the debt he'd secretly accumulated. The criminal case revealed that his consulting business had been a front for elaborate financial schemes involving identity theft and credit fraud, activities that went far beyond cheating on our marriage. Jessica and I became unlikely friends, bonded by shared experience and mutual support through the legal proceedings. Two of the other women joined us, and together we testified about Sylvester's systematic deception. Our collective evidence helped prosecutors build a case that resulted in significant financial restitution and a suspended jail sentence contingent on Sylvester entering therapy and making full financial disclosure. The investigative process revealed that Sylvester had been conducting some version of these deceptions for most of his adult life. Multiple relationships, fabricated business activities, financial fraud, elaborate lies about his background and qualifications. I hadn't married a man who made bad choices. I'd married a man whose entire identity was constructed from deception. Amy stayed for 6 weeks, helping me adjust to single parenthood and navigate the legal complexities. You realize what you did, right? She said one evening as we watched Emma sleep. Survived? You took down a sophisticated fraud operation while recovering from childbirth. You coordinated witness testimony, gathered digital evidence, and built a legal case that resulted in criminal prosecution. Lois, you're not just a victim who got justice. You're someone who dismantled a system that was hurting multiple people. She was right. Jessica had been one victim among many, but my systematic approach to gathering evidence had revealed the full scope of Sylvester's deceptions. Other women were contacted, warned, protected from further financial damage. The credit card companies were notified about fraudulent activity. The business networking sites were alerted about Sylvester's fake professional profiles. What had started as personal betrayal had become a complex case study in white-collar crime, with implications for how financial institutions, social media platforms, and law enforcement agencies track and prevent systematic romantic fraud. The legal proceedings took 8 months total. Sylvester spent 6 weeks in a rehabilitation program for compulsive lying and financial addiction. He moved to another state, began working in construction, a job that offered little opportunity for the kind of elaborate deception he'd perfected in white-collar environments. Emma and I settled into a new routine: smaller house, tighter budget, but also honesty, stability, and peace. The financial settlement ensured that Sylvester's debts didn't become our responsibility, and the criminal restitution provided some compensation for the emotional and financial damage he'd caused. I returned to work part-time with new appreciation for the investigative skills my financial background had given me. My colleagues knew about the divorce but not the full story. Only my closest friends understood that I'd essentially conducted a months-long forensic accounting investigation while learning to breastfeed. The phone call from Jessica during labor had been the beginning, but not because it revealed something I didn't know. It revealed something I'd been afraid to know, something I'd been quietly preparing for without admitting it to myself. Looking back, I'm grateful for that call. Not because betrayal is ever welcome, but because truth is always better than lies, even when truth is painful, especially when truth is painful. Emma is 8 months old now, healthy and curious, and completely unaware that her early life was complicated by legal proceedings and fraud investigations. She'll grow up in a house where honesty isn't negotiable, where trust is earned through consistency rather than charm, where love doesn't require elaborate deception to sustain itself. Sylvester sends child support payments on time and visits twice a month, supervised initially but now on his own, as he's demonstrated stability and honesty in his new life. He's good with Emma, patient and playful, and I hope the therapy helps him build relationships based on truth rather than fabrication. Jessica graduated to a better job and moved across the country, but we still text occasionally. She's dating someone new, someone whose background she verified thoroughly before getting emotionally invested. Trust but verify, she wrote recently, which sounds cynical but actually feels empowering. I know what she means. I'm not cynical about love or partnership, but I'm much more aware of the difference between trusting someone and simply failing to ask the right questions. The difference between believing in someone and believing their stories without evidence. Sometimes people ask how I knew to gather all that evidence, how I knew to prepare legally before I even knew what I was preparing for. The answer is that I didn't know exactly, but I'd grown up translating complex systems for my parents, and somewhere along the way, I'd learned to trust my instincts about when things don't add up. Sylvester's charm was compelling, but charm without substance is just performance. His explanations were logical, but logic without truth is just manipulation. His promises were comforting, but promises without follow-through are just words. I'd been translating his behavior for months without realizing it, and what it translated to was deception on a scale I couldn't have imagined. Now I'm translating a different kind of system. Single parenthood, co-parenting with someone whose relationship to truth remains complicated, building a life that's smaller in some ways but more authentic in every way that matters. Emma's first word was mama, which felt like a gift after months of legal proceedings where my identity had been reduced to plaintiff and victim and witness. I'm all of those things, but I'm also the woman who answered a phone call during labor and decided to fight back. I'm the woman who turned personal betrayal into systematic justice. I'm the woman who protected her daughter by refusing to accept that elaborate lies were simply the price of keeping the peace. Most importantly, I'm the woman who learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, even when the truth changes everything, especially when the truth changes everything.